Hello, y'all. Lisa Kipps-Brown, your host for Adaptable Entrepreneurs. And I have a really exciting guest tonight. This is a cool story because Brooke Norman is the founder of First6 Media, and she started her company during the pandemic. So we have lots of things to talk about, and she's so much fun and so interesting. But Brooke, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell more about what you do so I don't screw it up.
Oh gosh. Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So I'm Brooke Norman. I interestingly, I've been in marketing, I guess I should say, in growth strategy for the better part of a decade officially, and then the breadth of my career unofficially. I was raised by like a 3-time startup entrepreneur
Cool.
self-made man anyway, a mathematician who taught me everything you ever need to know was patterns. And if
Oh,
you can pay attention,
interesting.
if you can pay attention to patterns, you can figure out predictives. And then he also was the one that said, like, watch what a person does and watch what they're trying to have you do. And I started noticing that at a very young age. And so
Huh.
anyway, I've worked in marketing, helped grow small middle market businesses by multiples and by top line revenue for years. I left the company I was working for in April, stuck with them through May to help them with a full digital transformation build out because I dabble in programming and a few other odd
Uh-huh.
things. And so then I started First6 kind of accidentally. We do outsourced. Frankly, we only do 3 things. It's pretty straightforward. We with every single person, we come on and we develop a playbook, a marketing playbook that they can do. And then it's their choice. Either they can do trading, and that's all of our digital training. They can be a coaching client, or they can outsource the work to us and we grow it for them. So,
Nice.
yeah,
Okay.
so it's basically our big function is to build the marketing engine for your company that runs in the background and refills your funnel. So that's what we do.
I love what you said about your dad. Was it your dad?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so I guess that's what you're referring to in your Twitter bio.
Oh my God. Yes.
Because I wondered who you were referring to. Because I always go read people's stuff like that.
Right. Oh, and I always forget that I'm at my Twitter's, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's talk about my dad in there, yep.
yeah, that's cool though. Yeah, and it is this is totally off track, but it is so interesting. You got to learn as a young age, and it's like I didn't until I became an adult really realize math and how everything in the world is tied to it. There's a really cool book, and then I promise I'm not going to talk about math anymore. I think it's called The Number Devil. And I homeschooled my kids for a couple of years when we were in Florida, and that was one of the books we used. And it's really fascinating because that's what the whole book is about building out how math works and how it's tied to everything else. But I'm going to be
Right.
quiet about that.
No, it's interesting because again, I'm sure everyone's super excited because math is obviously the most interesting thing in the world. But it's funny to think of it this way, is that when you start to look at the whole world as values, and we all are predisposed towards something, you start to realize marketing is just psychology with one intended outcome, which is revenue.
Uh-huh.
So psychology has all kinds of outcomes, but in this case, when you start to realize we wake up and we have a brain wired to do X, if we can understand what other variables need to be set in place at different times because the brain functions very similarly across communities, you start to realize that recognizing those patterns starts to help you create real strategies that cause hockey stick growth or inflection points that can be maneuvered. So then it becomes never a question of scarcity. It becomes, well, how many people do I want to employ? How big do I want to be? And am I attracting the kind of people I want to continue working with? Which is why we really try to focus our clients, though they are very resistant. We try to focus them on who's the best client, not just
Yeah,
who's the most.
right.
I mean, ask Zoom if the most is working out. Like, I can tell you that there were so many competitors that came into the marketplace when Zoom basically just had all of us on there getting
Mhm.
angry and pissed because our stuff's not working. And in the background, all these other services were able to tune up and get
Yeah.
really good at something. And so we try to help our clients grow with a bunch of clients they're obsessed with helping, that they'd like wake up every day passionate about solving those people's problems, because
Yeah.
then you can build a brand that just infects it, like just has such massive diffusion across an audience.
Well, I love your mindset and the way that you think, and I cannot wait for your book to come out. I forgot
Ah,
to tell them, Brooke has this awesome book coming out. Now, I've pre-ordered it, but when is it actually released?
so we get them off the press, showing up on the 15th of January, and I am so excited. I mean, it has been. I have a friend, I should say, Dan Duran of Value Scout. He for a couple years now, he basically keeps threatening to stop being my colleague if I don't write that book. And it wasn't. It was not about post-COVID marketing, obviously,
Uh-huh.
but it was the interesting thing. I started realizing, I left my job. I did not originally start a firm. I kind of slept for a week and then
Yeah.
noticed that people had jumped on my calendar and
Oh,
I
wow.
oh, yeah, I just, I don't know, I was tired. I was just like, it had been a long couple of years, like, we'd been
Mhm.
through the ringer. I was on, like, again, talk about my dad. I've gotten a little weird socially in this COVID thing. I'm, like, oddly I can be a little, apparently I'm a huge dad fan, but,
Aw.
so it's interesting. He's been in all different fields, and he had talked to me about deployment schedules years ago, and so I was on a deployment sleep schedule, getting the company I was working for up and running because we, just like a lot of companies, we were hemorrhaging, and
Mhm.
so I was barely sleeping, and we made it through. We hit cash flow positive, then we hit revenue projections, then we were like moving forward, and I was like, okay, cool, I can just, bow out gracefully and go on to the next thing. But I had no idea what that was going to be. So I
Mhm.
legitimately like laid down. I think I woke up like a few days later. Like my kids
Wow.
are such sweethearts. I mean, and they were like, "Oh, cool. Like
Well,
mom
that's what
kind of
I was gonna tell the audience.
right."
I'm also a single mom of almost 11 and
Oh, yeah.
13-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so this is a lot. Starting a new
It is a
business
lot.
is a lot for anybody, but starting a new business in the middle of the pandemic shutdown, and you have 2 kids of that age, and they're homeschool well,
Well,
they're not
now,
in school. Yeah, they're home, and I mean, what a crazy time.
honestly, it was. And it was interesting how it was the first time I think in human history where empathy wasn't something you had to find. It was
Yeah.
universal. We all knew innately. Like, when someone was on the phone, was like, "So how are you?" It wasn't like
Yeah.
you had to be like, "Why are you asking?" Like,
Yeah.
every person had this momentary silence, which was so jarring. My daughter will always
Mhm.
say, like, "Mom, matter never stops moving." Wow, we're a bunch of nerds around here. I mean, in the best way, I think, but, like, literally the fact that my 10-year-old's like, "Mom, matter never stops moving."
That's so
But
funny.
anyway, that said, I felt like in the spring, it was like we were all uncomfortable because the world stopped moving and that's not supposed to happen. And
Yeah.
in that silence, I think we all kind of immediately, because we're not used to that, we're not used to having no noise and having to sit with things in
Mhm.
that way, especially problems that we don't have control over.
Yeah.
I started having all these calls, and it was just the same thing over and over, and it was weird for me because I wasn't always interacting with so many people, um,
Mhm.
and they were all funny enough, they were all looking for anything to talk about besides the pandemic, so me quitting my job out of nowhere and then, like, going off on my own was like the tea, so they're like, "Okay, cool, let's get on the phone with Brooke and see," and, I developed an early reputation for kinda, like, being no filter because I was tired, so
Yeah.
so I was like, I get on there and I'm like, "I don't know." Like, I was over it. It was interesting, but yeah,
So
no,
the
when
people that were calling you, they were people that you already knew?
oh, yeah, or that I knew through someone. That's
Yeah.
what was strange is that, to anyone out there who thinks, "I don't know if I can," or "I have
Mhm.
no proof that I could," you know, I always like to stop and think to yourself, like, is that really true? Like, where did that narrative come from? Because you stop
Yeah.
and think, even with SMART goals, people always try to change what SMART stands for, but when you get to the A and the R, attainable in and, like, realistic.
Yeah.
Attainable is like, have you is it possible? Like, in the
Mhm.
realm of reality, is it attainable? Like,
Mhm.
has someone been able to do it before? Attainable. Realistic is, do you have any proof that you could? Not that you have,
Right, that you
proof that you
could.
could. So I
Yeah.
would stop and think, you know, most entrepreneurs aren't like, oh my God, well, I grew up a genius and then I started a company. I mean, I'm like, yeah, right. No,
Right.
that is not what happens. Most people are like, I didn't know what to do and I decided, screw it, I'll do this.
Exactly. And like, I don't want to be an employee. I'm sick of everybody else and I want to be my own boss or whatever.
Or I suck at working for people.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
like we act like it's like some exalted position. And I'm like, no, the best thing
No,
I ever learned is you want to do something with your life? Do it. Let
yeah,
someone stop you.
yeah, I'm not a good employee. I'm just like, And I've worked for myself now for 30 years. So I would really be a terrible employee now.
I mean, we'd have to. I wish my bosses at EPI were on here. We're still we're on good terms, and
Yeah.
um, you know, they would probably agree that I was a valuable employee,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
an easy to manage employee, no, I mean any other term for an employee,
Right.
like not agreeable, very
Yeah.
challenging, had no problem speaking their mind, had no problem asking forgiveness. Yeah, and so I mean, I would say to any person, like, if you find yourself wishing that you had more of a voice, there is a way to have one. It's like, go do it. It
Yeah.
comes with risks, obviously, and you got to have a little bit of grit or a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I actually think, I mean, regardless of how long somebody has been in business, this year has been huge because it's either, you know, he's killed businesses or businesses are rising above it. And the, the one good thing about having a new business during this time period, you didn't even get a chance to be lazy or rest on your laurels or go, well, you know, Steve Sims and I were talking today about a safety net. And, you know, it didn't matter because all of a sudden, you know, no matter what, you had to hit the ground and do it.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Well, I
and
mean, we could afford a lot of bad management, a lot of bad marketing. Like,
yeah,
we could run fat, we could have nepotism, we could do whatever because there's like, that opportunity goes, there's another one screeching down the pike. Like,
exactly.
it yeah, it
Yeah.
has not been like that this year for most companies,
Uh-huh.
frankly.
Yeah,
So,
and so you've learned quickly how to weed out people that aren't good matches for you. You're not good for them, they're not good for you. You know, you're just not the right match. It doesn't mean that they're a bad client or you're a bad
company.
consultant. You're just
Yeah.
not good matches.
Right.
So you've learned that. You also learned you wrote your book your very first year. That's great because most people takes forever, but there's no better way of showing your expertise than getting it in a book and getting it out there.
It's true, and it also shows, balls. I
Yeah.
mean, sorry everyone, but it shows,
Oh,
like,
it's
you're
fine.
like, "I'm willing to put this in writing and say I think it." Because one of the things I'll tell you is the biggest mistake that I realized across the board, every company from every industry, because we work with I mean, we are pretty choosy about who, but we work with 6 different industries right now.
Okay.
And universally, the biggest mistake that we were able to afford in an up market that makes no sense now is that if your brand does not have an articulated, polarizing point of view on something that matters, no one can
Yeah.
hear you. No one can hear you because now no one's meeting you face to face. No one's so if you don't have an opinion that causes half or some group to be like, ugh, and the other
Yeah.
group to be like, yes, her,
Yeah.
then you're not saying anything.
Yeah, that makes you so recognizable. It's like the person in the crowd with the red cap on or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
it helps people recognize you.
Well, and it's also like talk again, I hate to go back to math, but it's you look at the patterns. And the fact
Mhm.
of the matter is even during the pandemic, you start to realize how people got so galvanized
Yeah.
behind the person who agreed with them. And
Yeah.
it's so perplexing to the other people who agree with the
Yeah.
other person. And
Yeah.
they're like, oh my God, but all that happens is Fauci developed brand loyalty. The guy's not a brand, he's a scientist.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
man has a brand now because people are galvanized behind a person who's like, "Don't do that." But that's the same thing, and this is not a political opinion. That is
No,
the
no.
reason why Trump was successful in the way that he was, is
Yeah.
talk about a person who get up there and be like, I mean, let's be frank. The dude used to be a Democrat, so it's obviously not about politics. This dude's a
Right.
master marketer,
Yeah.
and bless him, he's literally referenced in some of the oldest marketing books that we all learn from.
Hmm.
So it's interesting because you get so afraid of being disliked
Yeah,
that you don't ever make it easy for your tribe to find you.
that's right. Yeah. I
So,
got to meet your father, by the way.
oh, he
He
is
sounds like
something
a
else.
trip. I gotta meet him. But yeah, and so my you're lucky. I hate the word lucky, but it's good for you that you are able to learn these hard lessons really quickly because you didn't have time to pick up the bad habits
Right.
and have to go back and revamp them and break everything you were doing in order to do things right.
Yeah, we still managed it though. Managed to
Yeah.
throw a few goose eggs, and
So
in a way that had ripple effect. But to your point, we didn't we didn't have the luxury of
yeah.
having staff that was non-essential.
Yeah.
I mean, that became so clear as a business startup that the concept of essential versus non-essential employees is so hilarious. Like,
Yeah.
why are there non-essential employees?
Yeah,
Like,
why are you paying
period.
if they're
Like
not needed? Yeah.
like, they're not needed. Why do they like, wha so then you start to go, "Oh my god." So you start to think, "Okay, well, what would a business be like if everyone had to be essential? Would you work differently? Would you automate more? Like, what? Because it's like, what kind of infrastructure do you need to make it so no matter what storm comes, you
Mhm.
have the right people in the right seats? Because the idea of essential versus non-essential became such a hilarious concept as a startup business owner. I'm like, I can't afford a non-essential. Like, I can't even imagine. But then
Yeah.
I realized, well, yeah, like I'm sitting here in a scarce market. I'm not sitting here with a market that's like is so rich that like, we're not even really contemplating the other end of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I still managed to hire some of the wrong people and you
Yeah.
know, because I let myself grow too fast. Um,
And that's actually one of the biggest problems with starting a business.
it is
We
totally is.
experienced that, I mean, back in the early '90s with a different business that we owned.
Yep.
And I was like, at the time, I was like, "How can you grow too fast?"
What
Well,
does
I
that
did
even
it really
mean?
quickly.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can do that, and what you start to realize is if you're not ready to be if like we started growing faster than we should have, and the
Mm.
problem I had was, I mean, we're a marketing company and we have yet to start marketing. Because we have kind of this, I mean, not to sound terrible, but I'm a marketing person, so we have this red velvet rope effect that we are working inside. So we're basically only communicating with our current clients in official ways, and everything else is you have to kind of come through the red velvet rope before you start receiving those texts.
Yeah.
So that said, the problem became that most of the folks coming our direction uh, wanted to work with me. And
Mhm.
so sit here and say, okay, yeah, no, well, we've set up this company, I've got staff. It didn't end up mattering because if they weren't getting enough of my time, or if they
Right.
weren't like it couldn't scale. It also causes morale issues. People are, we're dealing with the fact that the average human being is struggling with like social like
Mhm.
dissonance. There's like, I mean, even something as silly, not it's not silly, and this is not a dig. I'm a big mental health advocate. But like seasonal depression, like
Yeah.
it's my understanding people get that. I come from trauma, so I have to tell you, like, that's not disruptive for me. Like,
Yeah.
this is not news to me that the world is dangerous and evil. Like,
Mhm.
this is everyday stuff. But even staff was like so affected by how their life had been affected. And so I messed up. I brought on too many people. Instead of taking fewer clients, I hired more people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wish I hadn't. If I could go back in time, it was
But you
so much
learned
clearer
from it.
now. Yeah,
You learned from it, though, and that's the important thing.
yeah, yeah. Learn
Yeah.
the hard way. I'll tell you, the trouble
But
was learning it the hard way.
if it had taken you longer to learn that, it would have had an even bigger negative effect, and it would have not only, on the business itself, but on more people. So, no, you're doing
Agreed.
great.
Agreed, agreed. Yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
pumped. It's you start to think like a year ago, actually really love the internet because it sends you like things of what you were doing last year or whatever, which I know is super creepy, but I'm not up to anything, so I don't really care. You
Yeah.
know, it's like follow me around, and it's like having theme music, you know? It's like walking in
Yeah.
and like, here's what you were doing. So, but to think what I was doing last year compared to what I'm doing this year, and it's just amazing what
It's like a different world, isn't it?
yeah, like I don't even know. It's like I don't recognize myself back then,
Oh,
or
sorry about my dogs.
oh, whatever.
I don't know if you can hear that. Yeah.
Oh, sis, no sweat. I mean, I literally me and my kids literally, like, we try to pretend we're away from each other by, like, wandering around the house, like I mean, I'm surprised that my son hasn't wandered up here and been, like, holding up a piece of paper at me, trying to communicate with me when I said I'm live on a show,
Oh,
and but, you
oh,
know
that would be fun. I would love it because I'm
oh,
just having kids at home. But
yeah,
yeah,
he
it's
doesn't give a damn. So, he
yeah.
tries. But
Well,
no
and my kids grew up in my business because I started it. Well, I started the first one when my youngest was 4 months old and my other was 2 years old. Yeah, and I made cold calls 8 hours a day. But
oh
that
my
was the first
god!
business. When I started this business, they were 6 and 8, and they literally grew up in my business. And then
How
they
was
go,
that? I'm
well,
so curious. I have to tell you, you know, as a mother, you sit there and think the consequence. I mean, mom guilt is real, and I try to not
yeah,
live with it, but I try to just basically be like, hey, you know, there's not one way to live a life, and so you're just
that's
showing up,
right.
and they'll be able to have their friends explain to them the other way. And so,
Yeah.
so how was that? How
Well,
affected or influenced your kids as
Well,
a
it's interesting because they both learned an immense amount. I mean, they grew up in the business because we lived in Florida. My office then was in the house. So they grew up around what I was doing and like by osmosis just absorbed it. And then they both started working for me for pay when they turned 15. Now my daughter does still work for me, but my son isn't. He hasn't been for a couple years because he just needed a break from it because it's all he'd ever done.
right?
The great thing is they got such a different view of the world and they learned so much about business. The bad the bad thing is, I mean, on the flip side of the good things are the bad things. I told my husband we've raised monsters
I mean,
because
really
they're
though.
just like, if you've grown up in that environment where you're just like, ah, not going to do this or whatever, it's really hard to transition over into a
Yeah.
normal.
Oh, yeah, you can't tell them shit. Like, I'm telling you, like, my kids, oh, I literally it was hilarious. I've been a single mom since my son's 4. So,
um,
gosh, so oh god, we're coming up on 10 years. I'm gonna have to, like, have some champagne or something. I don't know.
yeah,
Anyway, that said, um, so when you only have 2 hands and you got 2 kids, you're like, "Alright,
yeah,
I'm outnumbered, and now I'm out of hands." So, I grew up my dad was, funny enough, he wow, dad. Hey, dad, if you're watching, I love you.
yeah.
I
Hop
got
on,
2 kids.
board.
Hey, dad. So my dad, it's crazy. My biological mother, my dad and her got pregnant when he's 19. So he joins the Air Force.
Uh-huh.
And turns out they test whatever, he has genius IQ, which he doesn't know. He grows up in like a super tumultuous upbringing, like
Yeah,
8 kids, it's abusive, they're poor, like whatever. And so, not to minimize, but just saying that's the origin story. So
yeah,
then he tests genius. They are like, okay, well, we're gonna have you instead of having you as a grunt, we're gonna have you work in intelligence. He teaches himself Russian, and he's a Russian linguist on the wall in Berlin when the wall's still up during the Cold War, which is
oh my gosh.
where I'm born. So then we're there till I'm 4. We come back. He decides at 30, after my biological mom runs off with this biker. Um,
Oh.
yeah, so he's got 5 kids, and it's the biker is his best friend's
Oh, funny.
kid brother.
Yeah,
So they run off. He's like, and that this woman is madness. So anyway, he goes decides with 5 kids to go to college. He's like, you know what? I think I'll go to school. Gets double majors in mechanical and chemical engineering.
oh my god.
Develops an invention that creates a byproduct that was more valuable than gold, but then got bought by the federal government because it created a material, but the byproduct was uranium. But then he starts his first business, and so we grow up from about the age of, I don't know, 10, 12 maybe, with my dad running a business out of the house, and he was
Mhm.
the first of like 3.
Yeah,
And each time he'd grow it and sell it, grow it and sell it. And
uh-huh.
so, It's funny asking about your kids because I remember when the internet came out, my dad was like, anything you can think of is possible now. And I was like, I don't get it. And
Yeah,
he pulled up a thing and was like, look, we're on the internet. I was like, yeah, but that's just words. He's like, don't you get it? Anything's possible. Like if you can think of it, you can do it. And I remember
that's
sitting there going,
right.
I don't get it. But like
Yeah,
I remember being like, this guy's really smart and he gets it. So every time I'm with the clients, I'm like, I don't get it. I'm like, don't worry. Just explain what you want. Because if you can think of it, we could do it.
that's true.
It's so
Yeah.
true. So it's cool to hear your kids are alphas that way because my kids now,
Oh, they are. And
oh,
well,
they are
speaking
machines.
of back in the 90s with the internet, in 97, I actually started, I don't even know of another subscription-based business then other than like ISPs.
You and
But
my dad do have a meeting. You guys have something in common.
yes, so I actually started, it was a business that was failing, a client, and I took it and turned it into a digital subscription-based business, and it ended up being sold right before the dot-com bubble burst. So I just love looking at things and figuring out, you know, I don't know, it's just these ideas to strike. But the thing that it reminded me of, like, and I think you're a lot like this. Glenn and Aaron, they were around me. And they always saw whatever. I wasn't afraid. Fuck it, I was going to try it.
Right.
And so they're the same way. And when Aaron was like, I guess she was 15, she'd always been obsessed with Japan because my husband lived there before I ever met him, and she was into anime and stuff. So I bought her this
Sounds
cheapo.
cool.
Yeah, so I bought her this cheapo. It wasn't even Rosetta Stone. It was cheapo language thing from Sam's Club, like $40, because she wanted to learn Japanese. So I'm like, okay, go. Well, she's the type of kid. She stayed in a room a lot. She drew. She wrote poetry and stuff. So a few months later, she comes and goes. She'd always said she wanted to move to Japan after college. Then she wanted to go during college. And then it was like, no, I want to go this fall. I'm like, what? She'd already done the research. She had found this company, this nonprofit out of San Francisco that she could go through and yada, yada, yada. So she arranges this conference call. I'm in the den. She's in her bedroom. This woman's in San Francisco. So we're on the phone and the woman interviews her and everything. And then she goes, now I need you to write a letter to potential host families to explain, what you're like so that they can match you up well. Then she goes, and you have to write it in Japanese. And I'm like, how's she going to write it in Japanese? That's why I'm sending her there. And Aaron goes, Mom, I know how to write Japanese. I'm like, you
You're
do?
like, oh my God, you guys are having this dialogue live.
She had to be like, oh my God, this woman is not going to get mother. I had no idea. It was crazy. So that's the thing, your kids growing up around a strong woman who does, and a strong man too. But
Yeah.
I think especially a lot of times mothers tend to not be as alpha or whatever as we are. And
Yeah.
so they pick up on that and they become fearless. And when I said we raise monsters, I just meant because they're great. We get along great, but they're just like, whatever, the world is my oyster and I'm not going to put up with anything I don't have to.
That's exactly how I see. It's funny you say monsters. I say jarheads. I'm like, I've raised a couple jarheads. They are in formation. We could take down the city, just the three of us. But like, take these two to the bar, and they are just like the wildest. I'm saying, like, when they
But
decide, I used to, so I travel a lot for work, obviously over the past 10 years, and do speaking and all kinds of stuff. And so I have like a little, short list of nannies that are pretty much like my spouse when I'd be out of
yeah,
town. So it was funny though, because my kids have never been raised by their dad. Like he's great guy. Just we were young. It was whatever. Like that's
yeah.
a story for a different drink and a different show. So, like that said,
Yeah, we'll do
um,
that later.
yeah, I was gonna say we'll do that later. It's like after
The
hours.
late
The
show,
kids
yeah.
around. Yeah. So the nannies would always be so sweet, and I'm not saying I'm sweet. Might be like my 20th characteristic. If it's like 1
Yeah.
through 19, sweet might make it. Probably not still though. And so my kids would like smell blood in the water. And I'm telling you,
Oh yeah.
these kids were in charge. Like, I'd come home I remember the day that I came home, and I had a nanny stuff on the couch, like, she was sleeping there. I was like, "What's your stuff in here?" She goes, "Oh, well, Dominic told me, like, no one's allowed upstairs but you." And I was like, What are you talking about? I told you to stay in my room." She goes, "Oh, yeah, but after you left, he said, no, actually, you're not even supposed to go up there. Mom's just being nice. Don't go up there, or she'll be fine."
Oh
And
my
they
God.
go he was so compelling that I was like I literally looked at Dom and he's like, "What? I didn't want her up there." And I was like, "Oh my god." So this girl for a week slept on my janky couch that was not set up for someone to I mean, these kids, they are I was curious because 'cause I'm sure your kids are amazing, but, you do
Yeah,
think all the time about what are the consequences of how much the business demands
right.
and what it looks like.
And
'Cause
but you have to remember everything in life affects our kids, no matter what. If we stay at home, if we never work, if we work out of the house, if we work in the house. So it's kind of like a roll of the dice. And no matter what, we're going to, and people are probably like, why are y'all talking about parenting? But no
because
matter
that's
what,
like running a business,
yeah,
I'll tell
that's
you
right.
what.
But no matter what, probably you're going to have guilt because that's a normal thing, and sometimes I go, oh, if I had done this, that, and the other. But then I'm like, you know what, they wouldn't. I mean, when they were like 16 and 18, I would have adults come to me that were like 40 and go, oh my god, they know more about the world and business than I do,
Yeah.
because they just were so curious.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things my mother, not the one my stepmother who
Yeah,
became my mother, she she was also a career person. And I sit there and I think about how much this year has affected even business owners that I work with.
yeah,
It starts to be confronting, like how your home, and for some of them, it's been really nice because
yeah,
they're like restoring some of that stuff. For others, it's been very confronting. And what
yeah,
my mom, and I said to my mama, because I was obviously like, I don't cry to my dad. And interestingly, I'd like to say I don't cry ever, but unfortunately, I am an angry crier, so I cry plenty.
oh,
And
I cry
oh,
easily.
I'm like literally like I'm not falling apart. Water is the most powerful solvent in the world, and it is just crying tears of solutions right now. But that said, my mom would be like, "Hey, don't feel so guilty about the kids seeing you work or you not being able to do all the things. You can only do what you can." I was like, "I feel so guilty." And she goes, "Brooke, your only job as a parent is to remind the kids that they are powerful, that their self-esteem is the most important thing. Remind them that they're smart. Remind them that they can make good choices with their company they keep, and that they are beautiful inside and out. And anyone else who tells them different is lying to them." And she goes, "And then lastly, your only job as a parent is that you cannot protect your kids from the blows the world is going to deal them. All you can do
Yeah,
is make a safe haven for them to recharge after it happens. That
yeah,
you
I
are
love
not
that.
here to protect them. You're here to be like, come recharge, and you're
Yep,
always safe here." So I'm like, "Well, screw it then. I guess I'll make some money so we can be safe here."
that's right. No,
Oh,
they're gonna learn so much from you, and they're gonna see, I don't have to just take life as it comes. I can be in charge. And that's one of the things, the book that I'm writing, that, by the way,
yeah,
y'all, book is gonna be in it. And I've talked a little bit about it, but I haven't officially announced it, like told who's gonna be in it,
I'm excited.
unless somebody sneaks to the site and sees it. Um, but really, it's called Disrupt Your Now: The Successful Entrepreneur's Guide to Reimagining Your Business and Life. And what I was going to say is, the great thing is that when you own your business, you really can make it anything that you want. Unfortunately, too many business owners, especially when they become successful, they feel like they're stuck. They feel like they have to do it, and it becomes more like a job than a business. And so that's one of my things, because I've met so many people that are like, oh, one day I'll do this, one day I'll do that. And I'm like, do it now.
Right.
It's your business. There's no reason that you can't. And then with COVID, hey, it's a perfect time to release the book.
I
So
mean, it is literally like if you haven't already started to realize that the only way to stop the hurt is to let go of what you're holding on so tight to, it's like
yeah,
it was meant for you because when everyone started talking about Essential, when everyone started tucking in, if you weren't on that short list, I don't know what to tell you. Like it's time to reinvent and reimagine what it looks like.
yeah.
And
And
yeah,
I look at people like you, people with decades, ever how many years of experience. And most people, though, never have the entrepreneurial mindset. So if they are let go, not that you were let go, but if they are let go, like during COVID,
Yeah.
they're in panic city and they're like, oh my God, I got to get a job. And I'm like, have you ever thought of using all that knowledge and experience that you've gained through the years and doing your own thing? Don't let somebody else control you.
Right. Well,
So I
it's
love that
interesting
you're
you
doing
say
that.
that. Yeah, like, it was funny because when I started having people jump on my calendar, no joke, I thought they were all like, "Oh, hey, do you wanna come work here?" I didn't realize until much after that some sort of weird thing had skulked around that I had started my own consulting company, which I had not done.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I literally finally decided, "Okay, yeah, maybe I'll take clients. I should probably, like,
Oh,
form
that's
an
funny.
entity." Oh, yeah, no, I, like,
Uh-huh.
literally, like, I don't know, I just kinda was like, "I'm not sure," and I was feeling the same thing everyone was feeling, I think, a little, where it was like, "Is this theme bigger than this moment? Like, should I be paying attention to,
Yeah.
like," 'cause I happen to believe that control like, control is the Achilles heel of the average business owner, like, you are kidding yourself if you
Yeah.
think you have control, but if anything, you have influence, and I
Yeah.
start to think, "Okay, stop measuring what it was, start to think, okay, what if you were starting from nothing? What
Mhm.
company would you go to work for?" And I started to realize I've never worked for the company I wanna work for, meaning, like, I wanted to build the company I never got to work for. Like,
Yeah.
and so to me, I was like, I want to be treated this way. I wanna treat employees this way. I want to be able to pay this way. I want to be able to create an environment where pressure operates differently than
Mhm.
just it's a run out the clock situation. Like, I started to realize that I wanted to also attract clients who were results focused versus, um, I can see you sitting at your desk focused.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're gonna love meeting Steve Sims, my
I'm
coach.
excited.
Yeah, because he started his first business accidentally, and then he started his second, the coaching one now accidentally. After he wrote the book, about his life,
Right.
everybody started coming and wanting him to coach. So it reminds me of you. He's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? We had a conversation about that today. He's like, wait, what's going on here? I've been in the luxury travel business for decades, and these people are in whatever, and they think I can help them. But then he realized, oh, I can. Y'all have a lot in common.
That's interesting you say that because I was watching this the other day and I literally kept repeating it back to myself where it's like you there's certain people that may not realize they're entrepreneurs, but if you wake up every day with this like undiable passion for solving problems, like
Uh-huh.
where you're just like, I just feel like I exist. Like if you're a leader that stops and goes, leaders only exist because there are problems. If you've ever articulated something kind of like that in your head, you are an entrepreneur. That
Yeah.
is what you're doing. Is you're like, I fall in love with solving this person's problem. Like, and I know I can because I know that I have boundless thinking where it's like I don't have to do it off a template. I can
Yeah.
look at the template and be like, that I can see I'm willing to risk that I'm wrong to do it different than that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's funny because you mentioned I accidentally had this like second business emerge just recently. And it was not what I wanted to have happen because but I just kind of fell into it and I was like, "Oh, well, I'm doing it for me. I could probably help them." And I started this it's the silliest thing. It was it's going to sound so ridiculous, Lisa, but I started this thing. I get into like taglines or whatever. So I just generally feel very vulnerable. I got nervous because a couple of my family members back in Utah got COVID. And
No.
and I have been stringent because I'm like, my business can't afford to have me out,
Yeah.
period. My There is no one else to look after the kids. If I just started realizing like there is no failing. So we're pretty much
Right.
locked down.
Yeah.
So um I started thinking, okay, I should have more savings because obviously I've been draining my savings, like try to
Mhm.
like do all kinds of things and investments in the business. So I started this website called Single Mom Yard Sale.
Oh,
And it was literally just like, I have all this nice stuff. And I'm like, I don't need this stuff. I need money. So I started
yeah.
just like selling, but I did that. So like, because there's this whole movement of like single millennials, single parents, single
Yeah.
whatever. I was like, oh, whatever. If they Google single this, that it'll pop up. And people
Mhm.
love deals. And it was like
Yeah.
around Black Friday. And I was like, oh, it'll be like, I'll just push it out. And it'll just be, well, so I accidentally, and I did it, full confession, kind of drunk one night. And I was like,
That
so
was
it'll be
the
like,
best idea.
that's some of the best ideas, where I'm like, oh, I'm so unleashed. So then I had all these, no joke, all these single parents, affluent married parents, people have been single parents that are reaching out to me, no joke, to be like, oh, I'd love to buy this. Also, like, you should work in marketing. Like, this stuff is like literally, because it started going, to hundreds of thousands of people, which
Yeah.
I was really trying to target Cleveland. But,
Yeah.
once you hit a keyword that has enough things, it just like spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
So, I got some girl in Tennessee sharing some posts where I was like selling a couple tables, but I said, can't you see how these two tables are in love? Like, look at them looking at the sunset. They should like travel together. They're beautiful. They're this. And like, just because I thought it'd be funny, I was kind of
Yeah.
imagining Peterman from Seinfeld where he'd write these ridiculous stories about.
Yeah.
So anyway, so now I'm like helping. I like, well, basically I'm teaching all these like other business people on like Facebook and stuff, just to like how to position their stuff, how to quickly like commerce. And it's funny because they like throw all these kickbacks. And I'm like, it's really okay. You don't have to do that. And this one woman just keeps going, why? Like, why would I have a not reciprocal relationship with you? And I was like, oh yeah, you just are so interested in helping that you kind of accidentally
Yeah.
stumble on things that you do. So I wouldn't call it a business. It does make money, but it's more like a hobby that I'm
So
like, I can totally see it.
are you letting people sell through the site, or are you helping
Yeah,
them
they
position their stuff
they
for like?
they sell through the site now,
Oh,
and
okay.
I like and then so it's like I'm selling it, and then I pay them
Yeah.
their part, which I didn't wanna do, but I was like, "Well, I mean, they need help. This person needs the money or whatever," and I got
Yeah.
thinking, we make it no joke, like, I had someone say this to me 2 months ago because 'cause I'm shit at accepting help,
Me
ter
too. Yeah.
terrible. I will give help to my last drop
Yeah,
of
that's how I am.
yeah,
Yeah,
but,
I'm a middle child though. That's what I blame mine on.
well, I would also say I mean, it's funny. Have you taken any of those personality tests?
Yeah, well, I took the Colby test recently, but that's not personality really, but
Oh,
yeah.
you should I'm gonna send you a link to Enneagram because
Okay.
number 1, it's a personal attack, and I'm like, "The audacity. Why are
Yeah.
you reading me like this?" Like, I'm offended.
I'm
But
kind of afraid to find out what mine
it's
is.
so accurate. I was like, and
Yeah.
apparently I'm an 8. So to all the 8s watching this, hello. I know we'll never see each other because we're lone wolves who are prone to alienation, though we will give to our dying breath, but we will never take. And then we'll also be like, it's fine. We kind of like have spent enough time feeling alone in a crowded room, but
Yeah.
like being hypersocial. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. So I had someone say to me 2 months ago who noticed I was in a situation where I had gotten myself in a debacle because
Yeah.
frankly, because you just shouldn't hire your friends. But that said, um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Jesus. So,
I did that too. Been there,
yeah,
done that.
yeah,
Yeah.
'cause you think, oh yeah, I'll just trust this. I'm like, wow, no, what you're really saying is you're trusting that you're seeing it clearly.
Yeah.
You just should never rose color goggle anything.
Mhm.
But he said to me, Brooke, stop. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I don't like taking help. He's like, we make it through with our friends. And I was
Yeah.
like, damn, you're right. So that's like when these people were like, striking up conversation, this and that, and they wouldn't accept help. I was like, hey, we make it through with our friends. And I started to realize how powerful of a statement that was.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, why do we gotta go it alone? And it goes all the way back to the first point, which is like, if you're not putting your real opinions out there, if you're not using your marketing as a way to be like, this is what we do and this is why we're passionate about it, you
Yeah.
miss an opportunity to attract the people that will be just as consistent, dedicated, and productive clients for you as you will be a provider for them.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like we talked about earlier, it lets you weed them out and them weed you out because
Oh,
you don't wanna waste either of your time or money.
yeah.
And,
No,
they might know somebody else who'd be better to work for you, and you might know somebody you can refer them to, but you both end up being better off.
100%. And we just try to like put it on the table early and basically
Yeah,
set like ground rules. Like this is
yeah,
kind of how we operate. And so that it doesn't have to be personal. So that it's, our goal is
right.
to identify in the first 45 days whether or not we keep working together. We
Yeah,
don't have to, like, right away, but, you know, there's environmental factors. I guess
Yeah.
I guess if there was one thing like coming off of the book that I have realized about being a startup entrepreneur running I consider us like a marketing growth firm versus an agency because
Yeah.
we don't like pay us a retainer for us to like crank out some brochures and stuff because I'm not interested in like busy work and I get it's beautiful busy work but it's
Yeah.
just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
Like we do growth projects, which means that it has a start date, an end date, inflection points, metrics. That's what we do.
Right.
So one of the things that's interesting about doing that at home and having the kids be officially homeschooled, not like virtual schooled, like
Yeah.
officially homeschooled, is I started to realize number one, there isn't enough education for me to accomplish the curriculum and have them do 8 hours a day. They were getting done in like an hour and a half. So I had to come up
Mhm.
with curriculum. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to teach you psychology, marketing, branding, like whatever. We'll start there because it's what I know. It's what I do all the time.
Yeah.
And I started to realize that in writing the book, that the kids are good at marketing. And I started to think about every conversation I have with the kids. They have a 2021 goal and it was very simple. I mean, when you ask a kid their goal, they also can just say it. I'm telling you, there are adults. I'll be like, "You're hiring me for $100,000. How many leads is the right number?" And they can't say a number. And I'm like, "What
Yeah.
are you afraid of? You're not afraid of paying that number, but you are afraid of telling me what you want because there's something so hard as an adult to admit to yourself out loud to another person who's going to know if you don't get what you want. It's
Right.
confronting. Or
Yeah.
like I was like, all right, so kids are all into YouTubers, and they're like, what do you want your goal to be? And they were like 100,000 followers, like that. I'm like, okay, so we're doing this branding
Funny.
like machine to do that, where they have to build their merch, they have
I
to build.
love it.
Well, so what's interesting is that the same things that I have to like rip out of the business owners' personalities that I work with now, kids know innately because you start to realize in school, and I think it is one of the opportunities the pandemic has presented is that in school you get trained every day that your personality is disruptive to your success.
Yeah.
That you need to quiet down, conform, get in line because in a society built for that machine, it doesn't work.
Mhm.
But then it's funny because what they're doing is systematically train you to be terrible at marketing. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
because like that thing that you were told too loud, to this, to that is everything
Mhm.
in your marketing. It's everything. And
Yeah.
so it's funny to see, I mean, literally how naturally the lessons took to kids and I would spend all day on the phone being like, "No, no, no. I don't want you to say it that way. I want you to say it in a real way." And I
Mhm.
will make sure that I cover your ass. We'll be it'll be
Yeah.
totally fine, but I need to know what you think. I don't want the right answer. I want the real answer. And
Mhm.
how much adults if you're sitting here now listening and thinking about what's the biggest change that I can make in my marketing in 2021, is if you don't know what your polarizing brand trait is, that would be a great place to start. Like I can tell you that I I have some pretty pointed opinions about what is marketing and what is not. And
Mhm.
I can tell you it alienates a group of people that don't like it because it makes them feel like they waste their money, which is fine. And
Yeah.
it also brings a lot of people that are like, that's exactly what I think too. And
Mhm.
those people find that worth spending money on. So,
So let me ask you this, for the people, the clients that you have a hard time pulling that out of, what do you do to get them to do it? So do you have any tips for the listeners that might help them?
yeah. So if you're workshopping this with yourself, I want you to go back over the past, I don't know, even month and think of the times you've bit your tongue because you were like, it's not worth saying.
Yeah.
That is a polarizing opinion you have that you should explore. Like, stop and think, oh, it's not worth it. I'm like, well, what's not worth it? Because now we're talking about what something's worth, which means we are right on a topic, which means there is a consequence
Yeah.
for exposure. And those moments where you think there's a consequence for exposure, that's actually where to lean in and be like, I don't agree with that. Or I have to tell you, when you said that, did you mean this? You don't even have to reveal it. What you do have to do is start to be like, we are not lackeys afraid of you terminating us. We are always willing to break up with you, and you should always be willing to break up with us. In fact, one of the things that we tell our clients is we will not take a client for more than a 6-month term in the first because we want to be able to fire them.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And we're like, well, typically people who say they're coachable aren't, just like how people who say they're generous aren't.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
if you say you're generous, you're not fucking generous. Like,
That's right.
I'm sorry, like you're not. Like if you're generous, you don't have to say it. So
Yeah.
like people are like, oh, we're so coachable. I'm like, oh, really? And we literally like take a wall and put it on the wall. And we're like, okay, here we go. So, and then we tell them that though. So we're like, oh, hey, you did one of our tells. And they're like, they don't like that we're psychoanalyzing it. But what we do try to say is this is we are team you. And so if we are more invested in your success than you are invested in your success, it won't work. Just like if you're defensive versus open, you won't grow. And same goes for us. And so anyway, that's kind of a tip I would give people is when you start to
That,
find yourself pulling
yeah.
back, write it down. You don't have to say it on the call, but write it down and explore like what would I be willing to say? Like today I was talking with one of my leadership coach clients and she was having a hard time. We happened to be doing this exercise and we were going through and I started showing her a bunch of quotes, famous quotes that everyone loves, which is another thing you could do. If you go through a bunch of famous quotes everyone loves and you're like, I hate that everyone loves that, you should probably look into that. You're
I
polarized.
need to do that because there are a lot of like, bleh.
Well, right. So she had this visceral reaction to the Albert Einstein one where he's talking about intelligence. Intelligence isn't about this, it's about learning. And she goes, well, not really. And she said it like that. And I was like, I'm sorry. And she goes, well, if I could change it, I'd do this. I'm like, interesting. If you could change Albert Einstein's quote, like this, like that. And so I'm telling you, going online and being like, Albert Einstein is wrong about this. It's actually this. You have now said something worth listening to because
Yeah.
people will disagree with that, which means there will be people like, finally, someone said it.
Yeah. And if you're going to say the same thing, there's no reason in people listening because all they got to do is go read his quote.
Yeah, that's why they got a like button. No one cares if you want to just go repeat what something someone said.
Yeah.
So that's
That's
why
a
it's
really good idea though to look at the quotes like that. I love that.
especially cliche. If you think it's cliche, wow, you just found an area where you probably have something to say.
Okay.
That's
Neat.
why I got to tell you, that's why these disruptive politicians are so effective.
They are because
They're
everybody's like, finally somebody said it.
said it. Right. And it's like
What everybody else is thinking and what even all the other politicians are thinking, but they're afraid to say.
exactly. It's funny because the galvanized audiences behind two polar opposite people, like if you like AOC and Trump,
Yeah.
the galvanized followings behind these people, it's because they are literally for the first time in years, someone is getting up there and not acting like a politician.
Yeah.
They're actually acting like master marketers.
Yeah.
And so the fact of the matter is, I want you to think of all the successful brands you know. The Kardashians. Do they not say their opinions that totally offend people and have billions of people like followers? You start to go, wait a second. We're all trained to be professional, but every successful model that we can pinpoint is not professional by those standards. They're
Yeah.
professional, but by their standards. You look at, I mean, even the guy who owns Virgin, Branson.
Richard Branson.
Right. You look at the things Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. I mean, you go through brand by brand by
Yeah.
brand. All these people have always been willing to be disliked.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in how to be one of the first people top of mind with the right people in 2021 is you should get very clear on whose cup of tea you are not because they're not yours either.
I love that, Brooke. That's awesome.
Well, I'm glad because I really have enjoyed this and you're my cup of tea.
I
So
know. I've had you almost an hour, and I hate to let you go, but I know that you have kids stuff to do, and I'm almost out of vodka.
oh my gosh, it's I mean that's the next crisis that is coming our way. My God. I
That's
mean,
so
not to
funny.
make light of it, obviously. Sorry.
No,
Humor
I
is
know.
my medicine, everyone. I have a dark humor. I happen to be
Me too. Yeah, but I've had so much fun talking with you, and I cannot wait to read your book. I cannot wait for it to come out. I already know just from reading your content and talking with you. I already know I'm going to love it.
well, I hope so. I tried to make it I will say this. I try to write every book in 2 ways. One is knowing who my audience is, which by the way, if you're ever writing a book, your audience is people who buy books. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Like,
Yeah,
there are people that buy books, and it doesn't mean that they're the one that's gonna read it. There
right.
is a way to think about how people buy books, and it's all about the title. Because as a person who buys books, it's
Uh-huh.
so that said, the second thing is that you want your book to be the kind of thing that a person would take with them somewhere because they've
Yeah,
started making notes in it. And
yeah,
so I tried to so Lisa, you're gonna have to give me feedback on I tried to basically create some scenarios where you're like, "Yeah, that's what I'll you know what, I'll do that. I'll say that." I tried to actually instead of, like, dancing around, like, figure it out for yourself, I'm like, "I don't know, if I was you, I'd do this." You know,
yeah, and that's what I love, like, some of
yeah,
the things that you said tonight, they're not just the same old stuff that we've been hearing from somebody else, and it's actionable.
right. Like, I
Anybody
like
can do it.
right, like, I that's one thing that if there was a brand that I would be proud one of the things I tell my clients, again, because you can't ask, "What's your brand?" Because then they answer the
Uh-huh.
right answer.
Yeah,
Say things like, "Oh my gosh, like, I just heard this from another client who's worked with you. They were, like, kinda talking about you, behind your back, good ways and bad ways. What do you think they said?"
uh-huh.
A person will tell you what they think is wrong with their customer
Yeah,
and what they hope people think about them behind their back, and that's their brand. That's their commitment. Like, you start to realize, like, how you want to be seen when you're not in the room is your best version of yourself, and if I was
yeah,
thinking of mine, it's like, no nonsense, probably a little intense and, dialed in, talks too fast, fine with that, but sincerely invested in building an outcome that you're proud of, which is what I would be proud of, so that's why I'm like, if this book can take a f you know, I mean, we were pretty lucky with pre-sale. Frankly, I just pushed it out there because I was starting to have a panic attack. I'm like, "If I look at this thing anymore, we just gotta get it out," because 'cause I'm like, "I'm gonna literally just trash it." So, I just thought if, if those first, 500 or so people can read it and there's something they can do that they can measure from the day that I started doing that, this much more revenue, I will just feel so proud because there are small businesses that should make it.
yeah, that you can really help. I personally, without even reading it, just because I know the kind of content you put out and I know the way you think, I personally think it's gonna end up being a
Well,
big
I hope so. Thank
yeah,
you.
I think it is, and then we'll have to have a party, and then hopefully mine will be
No.
too.
I mean, I'm with that. We will
Yeah,
absolutely do that. We'll do like a pop-up. Maybe
that's
we'll just
right, that's right.
road trip.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me, but tell everybody where they can go to buy
Oh,
your book.
yes, absolutely. So if you are looking to get a copy of Hey, You're Muted, your post-COVID essential marketing guide, you just go to heyyourmuted.com and it will drop you on the purchase page to get your pre-order. We are limiting pre-order to the first 1,000. We only have a couple 100 copies left because I wasn't sure. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure. And you get excited, but you don't want to be too foolhardy. So
Yeah, yeah.
that
But,
said, we'll
yeah, as
have
soon as I saw it, I was like, "Gotta get it," plus I love the title too,
oh,
so
thanks. Yeah, well, honestly, bane of everyone's existence. I literally am like, if I have to say that again or be that again, ugh. So that said, but I'll
funny.
tell you, it was meant to be a little ironic because a lot of people's marketing has become unhearable in this
Yeah,
market. So
yeah, yeah.
double
Well,
entendre.
thank you for all of your insight, and thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for being in my book. And everybody out there, if you enjoyed this show, come back next week, next Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. And you can rewatch this on Facebook, and it'll also be on my site and on YouTube. Thank you,
Awesome.
Brooke, so much. I appreciate it.
So
Oh, I
much.
forgot to say, my
Oh,
site is lisakipps.brown.com, LISAKIPPS brown.com, and that's where y'all can watch all the shows. Thanks, Brooke.
thank you.
Bye.